How does a deed in lieu affect my taxes? Welcome back. I'm Ted Thomas. This episode is all about how does a deed in lieu affect my taxes? Well, what is a deed in lieu? Well, it simply means that someone is going to give a deed back to either a seller or a bank. And if they do that, what's the tax concern on that? So I'll come back to all that. So I'm Ted Thomas. I've been involved in tax lien certificates and tax deeds for about 25 years. I'm also going to teach you a little bit about tax lien certificates, tax deeds, but most importantly, before I finish this video, I'm going to explain two mistakes that newbies make all the time at tax auctions. So stay with me till the end because I want to show you how to save $25,000, $50,000, and even $100,000 at a tax auction and not make a big mistake. I'll be right back. Stay tuned. How does a deed in lieu affect my taxes? Well, that's really a tax question, and I'm not a CPA and I'm not an attorney, so let's go through it from an experienced person's viewpoint here. Usually a deed in lieu is used when you're giving property back to a seller or you're giving a property back to a bank. What you're trying to do is you're trying to prevent going through the big foreclosure mess that happens. All right, now tax deed properties are not the cream of the crop. These are usually C's and D's, there's a few B's. All the A properties go sky high at auction, so you're probably not going to get one of those. I'm not suggesting you don't try, but the point is, these properties that we're buying, we're going to sell them with a contract to sale, and we're going to sell them into a used market. So tax deed properties are not the best ones of all. Now, this property tax business has been around for 200 years. There's going to be plenty of property. This is a business of abundance. Way too many properties. As a matter of fact, most auctions, they can't sell all the properties. All right, now every property in the United States that's not a church or a school, well, I can tell you right now, it's taxable. So the tax system is going to levy taxes. So the legislature makes the rules. They then tell the treasurer at the county, you levy the tax, you collect the tax. If you can't collect the tax, you need to do a tax defaulted auction. Well, when you sell properties at a tax defaulted auction, the county is going to sell them for peanuts. By that I mean for back taxes. You might be able to buy a property for 10, 20 cents on the dollar. I've had clients buy them for 5 and 6 cents on the dollar. But plan on spending 10, 20, 30 cents. Now, if you go much over 30 cents, well, then you're going to get into difficulty in the selling. Now, all the property owners have to pay taxes. Now, when they don't pay the taxes, this confiscation process is going to take place. All right, if you buy those properties, you're going to sell the property yourself, or you're going to sell it to someone else that's going to do that. Now, if you sell a property yourself, some of your buyers are not going to pay you. If they don't pay you, well, then they might want to just give you a deed and give you the property back. So that's called a deed in lieu of you foreclosing because they couldn't pay. So it's a deed in lieu of going through the legal process of foreclosing. So this happens all the time, and if it does happen to you, it's an easy process. You just tell them, give me a deed in lieu, you get your property back, and then you can resell it. Now, how does that affect the taxes? Well, on both sides, it has some effect. I'm not a CPA, I'm not an accountant, so I can't give you tax advice. But I'm telling you, if someone makes money, they are going to have to pay taxes. The people losing money, or losing the property, are probably losing money, so they probably have a loss that they can take. I can't give you a direction on that. Now, the county treasurer is going to levy taxes. When they levy taxes and they don't get paid, an auction is going to take place. When that auction takes place, you're buying from the county. The county is going to give you a deed to the property. Now, when you resell it, that's where the deed in lieu will come in. Because if you resell it and the people don't pay you, it's much easier to say to them, give me a deed in lieu. In other words, in lieu of the foreclosure. All right. The county seizes the property. That's a perfectly legal process. When you sell a property, perfectly legal process. If the people don't pay you, you would much prefer to miss the foreclosure process. Let's go back and give you some foundational material. The foundational material is this. Tax defaulted auctions have been taking place for 200 years. There are going to be thousands of properties come up for auction this year. Now, in the United States, there are going to be 5,000 auctions this year. That means there's going to be thousands of properties. When they're all added up, probably 2 to 3% of all the properties will go to some kind of tax defaulted auction. So learning the process in real estate is difficult for most people. With tax lien certificates, it's very easy. A very simple process. The county forecloses, you buy it for pennies, you can sell it any way you want. You want to sell it to a fixer-upper person, you want to sell it to another investor, or you maybe want to sell it yourself and be a banker. So you can be your own banker in this business. All right, now I don't know where you are and what you know about tax liens and deeds, but if you have more questions, just put them below and I'll try to answer those for you. All right, so let's go back to the episode of today. How does a deed in lieu affect my taxes? I can't give you the exact answers, but I can tell you anytime there's a sale, a profit or a loss, that triggers profits and losses. So that needs to be handled by a CPA and someone's qualified. I personally am not an attorney or a broker, so I don't handle any of that. But I can tell you, most sellers, that would be you once you learn how to do this, most sellers will learn about a deed in lieu sometime within their first few years. Because when you sell the property, someone might want to give it back. Well, if they don't want to give it back, you'd have to go through a court process. So you could offer them a deed in lieu of you going through the court process. Most people don't want to have to get an attorney, so they'll give you a deed in lieu. If it triggers a profit, someone's going to pay a tax. If it triggers a loss, there could be the same situation in the loss. All right, I can't give you that advice because I'm not an attorney. So profits and losses are always going to be taxed. All right, so how does a deed in lieu affect your taxes? You need a CPA and someone that's well-versed in this subject to get an accurate answer. I'm Ted Thomas, and I'm going to answer a couple of questions before I go. The question is, does a bank offer a deed in lieu, or do you have to request it? The homeowner is struggling, so you could suggest it to them and tell them, if you don't want to go through the foreclosure process, just deed the property back to me. All right, I'm not an attorney, so I'm not giving you legal advice. This is a question that's only for people in trouble. Our tax lien and deed training keeps people out of this kind of trouble. But the point is, a deed in lieu is just so the lawsuit doesn't take place. The foreclosure will probably take place anyway. However, I don't know what the credit bureau is going to do, whether they're going to count the deed in lieu or not. But if you try to go to, and you haven't made your payments, your credit rating is probably pretty bad. It's just going to get worse. Let's talk about those two big mistakes that I mentioned earlier. Now, these big mistakes cost people a lot of money. So here's where you want to be careful. If you're headed off to the auction, you need to give it a lot of thought before you get there. Now, what kind of thought am I concerned about? I don't want you to spend money that you don't know what you're doing. So don't buy a property or bid on a property unless you've looked at the property. That means eyes on the property, boots on the property. You need to have looked at the property or have someone come and look at it for you so that you know the property is there. If there was a hurricane the day before or there was a fire, you need to take that into account. Why? Because if the property is destroyed at the auction, you're going to pay the county money. I don't know if they'll ever refund it if the property's been burned down or whatever. So that's big mistake number one. The big mistake number two is very similar. You go to the auction, you're excited, someone outbids you, so you don't want to go home empty-handed, or you don't want to leave your computer empty-handed if you're doing it online, so you start bidding on other properties which you haven't seen. Now, if you haven't seen those properties, that's one problem, and it's a big problem because now you probably haven't figured out an exit strategy. So if you don't have an exit strategy, you don't want to bid. You could easily bid much higher than the property's worth because you don't know the neighborhood and you haven't planned your exit strategy. So those are two big mistakes. You'll save yourself a ton of money. They're not too difficult, but you need to pay attention when you go to auctions. Well, I wish I had more time, but I'm running out of time. So I have a gift, G-I-F-T. I have a gift for you, and it's going to help you take control of your financial future. What is that gift? I call it a Quick Start program, and it's all about tax lien certificates and tax deeds. Now, it's a two-part home study program. You can get started right away talking about tax lien certificates in part one, give you all the secrets there. And then in part two, I'll show you how to make money. Now, you want to do this because you want to make money, and you make big money with tax deed and tax defaulted property. So both of those are included. I've been doing this for decades. You can get started right away with this free gift. All you have to do is register below.